Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. MC-Mura here, and in today's video we're gonna talk about something a little bit controversial because we're gonna talk about Street Fighter 5 and I'm gonna compare it in some ways to King of Fighters and Guilty Gear Strive. This video is obviously not gonna be for everyone, and I'm just gonna talk about this from the point of view of someone who genuinely like all three of these games. But I mean, come on, I will always be a Street Fighter loyalist at heart. And here in the screen you're looking at a tweet by Addison. By the way, Addison is responsible for a good portion of the mods that you'll see me use for Poison. This particular one you're looking at right now, he was responsible for it, so make sure you follow him up if you're interested. I will leave a link to his Twitter page in the description. Here Addison was talking about crossplay, right? And that because Street Fighter 5 have crossplay, it is it does have a larger number of players compared to King of Fighters and Guilty Gear Strive. Now obviously I do think that crossplay is a very important feature. It should be in a good portion of the upcoming fighting games. It is a common feature now in many shooter games and all of that, so I would like to see it become more of the industry standard, and I really hope that Street Fighter 6 will have it, right? It makes the community feel a lot better. But this is not really what we're talking about. We are talking about the idea that looking at these numbers, these are obviously the Steam charts. If you're not aware, this is simply highlighting the number of players on playing the games currently, the peak number of players in the past 24 hours, and obviously the all-time peak. And here we have a look on King of Fighters, Guilty Gear Strive, and Street Fighter 5. And what's really interesting about this is that Street Fighter 5 have more players actively playing than both King of Fighters and Guilty Gear Strive. Obviously this is to be expected, right? You have to be honest about this. Street Fighter, and I mean no ill but what I'm saying, it is the truth. I know a lot of people have the perception that anime is like super popular or that King of Fighters is on Street Fighter level. That's not really the case. Let's be honest here. Street Fighter is a household name, and obviously Street Fighter is expected to do better. However, when it is Street Fighter 5, I find it to be really interesting because for me, Street Fighter 5 is somewhat of a magical game. Street Fighter 5 is a game that I always had an interesting relationship with, let's put it that way. There are parts of the game that I don't like, but I always keep coming back, and I never really had this with Street Fighter 4. Street Fighter 4, despite it being the, too many others, a darling, like a lot of 09ers absolutely, worship Street Fighter 4. That's not really the case for me. Despite me being an actual 09er, I managed to break free from Street Fighter 4 at some points. I was never able to do that for Street Fighter 5. Now, everything aside, when you take a look at this, obviously King of Fighters is a game that just launched less than a month ago, I believe, or about a month ago at this point. And Guilty Gear Strive is less than a year old. I think it came out in June, if I'm not mistaken, so it must have been like 9 months. While Street Fighter 5 is a game that came out in 2016, and currently it's a game that is desperately, the community is desperately waiting for a balanced patch. It is probably the interest in Street Fighter 5 is at an all-time low, especially due to the release of Street Fighter 6, right? A lot of people are just waiting for Street Fighter 6. Yet I find it so interesting that despite all of this, Street Fighter 5 still managed to pull through and be one of the more relevant fighting games on the market, and kinda maintained its consistent player base. I know that it's a game that gets a lot of hate. There is a commenter that goes in almost every one of my videos to just shit on Street Fighter 5, and I almost find it comical how this person seems to have dedicated their lives to do that. But it is what it is. Obviously everyone is free to make their life choices. But anyways, back to the whole thing. I know that there are a lot of people who don't like it, and obviously the netcode is a big issue with the game, but you still get a lot of people who just say people only play this because it's Street Fighter, and I think this is for me it's a twofold, right? Because obviously playing a game because it's Street Fighter, I mean, duh, that's kind of the point, right? Like every brand will have its dedicated fan base that will just support it no matter what. And you know, there is the Mortal Kombat fans who will play Mortal Kombat 11 just because it's Mortal Kombat. There is the Battlefield fans that will play the newest Battlefield just because it's Battlefield. This isn't everything, right? And if the game is good or bad, there will always be the dedicated audience. But I do think it is, aside from the netcode, which is a big issue, obviously, I understand it is one of the bigger issues around the game. It is not perfect. It's not the worst netcode by a mile, like a lot of people make it out to be. Obviously not great, right? It's not great. Is it the worst though? Not really. Like by the time that Street Fighter V was out in 2016 or so, the netcode was okay. It is even today, I think it's a middle of the pack netcode. There are certainly much better options, but there are certainly much worse options as well. But despite all of this, I think a lot of people to this day kinda unfairly treat Street Fighter V. I feel like it's one of these games where, maybe it is my bias because I do genuinely like it. It is one of these games where people expect, I feel like they expect, what they expect from the game is not what it is delivering, and for them that somewhat makes it bad. Like, I know a lot of people want the game to be expressive and I want to do all the crazy combos and characters to do crazy shit, and that to me never really was Street Fighter. Like, when you check out, obviously the definition of what makes a Street Fighter game is different from one person to the other. Some people think it is the neutral, the fundamentals, the footsies. Some people think that Street Fighter 3 is the greatest fighting game of all time, and that is up to debate. For me, it is barely a Street Fighter game to begin with. I really don't like the idea of air parries that makes fireballs almost worthless, and there's a lot. Obviously, I don't really want to get into the discussion, but the idea that Street Fighter games always had like the craziest shit, for me that never really was a thing. Street Fighter for me was always the grounded footsies game, like the grounded neutral game, and it is something that Street Fighter V does deliver on, at least in my opinion. Is it the best Street Fighter game ever? I don't know about that. It will always be different from one person to the other, but I do think it is still a fairly good Street Fighter game. In its current state, and I know this might piss off some people, I do think Street Fighter V is a good Street Fighter game, especially the PC version, and especially if you're playing in an optimal setup. This is a good Street Fighter game, and obviously compared to other fighting games on the market, I do think Street Fighter V Champion Edition or Championship Edition, whatever it is a very good deal, all things considered. If you have enjoyed this video, please leave a like or a comment. Let me know your thoughts about this. Do you find it interesting that the game is still that relevant, or is it somewhat surprising to you? Obviously it's a game that, I mean, we have had Dragon Ball is gonna end Street Fighter, we have had Mortal Kombat will end Street Fighter, we have had Strive will end Street Fighter. But I've been always saying the only thing that finishes off or kills a Street Fighter game is another Street Fighter game. If you have enjoyed this video, please leave a like or a comment, helps the channel so much. I will be leaving a link to the Patreon page, the Discord server, Twitter and Twitch pages in the description below. Thank you very much for watching and stay safe.